People always ask me, Matt, how do I make someone regret losing me? And I always say the same thing: you don't. You don't chase closure. You don't chase validation. You live so well, so fully, that their silence becomes their sentence and your peace becomes their punishment. See, karma isn't some dramatic moment where everything crashes down in public. No, karma is subtle. It's slow. It creeps in late. When the phone doesn't buzz anymore, when your name comes up and their chest tightens just a bit, and when they realize that the version you they once knew, untouchable now. Karma doesn't yell. It doesn't need to. It just lets him sit with the weight of what he didn't value, until he starts to miss the sound of your love in the quietest moments of his own regret. We often imagine karma as some big dramatic force, like it storms in with thunder, flips the table, and shouts, "This is what you get." But in real life, karma is rarely that loud. It doesn't need to be. The most powerful consequences aren't always visible to others. They're felt deeply, privately. The first sign karma has arrived isn't chaos. It's quiet. And that's exactly why it hits so hard. When someone has hurt you, disrespected you, or taken you for granted, there's a part of you that wants them to see the damage they've caused. We think, if they could just feel what I felt. But here's the true thing: they often do. Just not in the moment. Not when they're surrounded by attention, distractions, or ego boosts. No, karma waits, it watches, and then it shows up when the noise dies down. Think about those quiet moments. Alone in their apartment, when the texts have slowed down, when the hype has faded, when they're scrolling through photos or hearing a song that used to mean something. That's when it starts. The subtle sting of realization. Not because someone told them they messed up. Not because you screamed it in their face, but because their life is suddenly missing something they didn't realize mattered so much when they had it. And that's what makes karma so effective. It isn't about punishment, it's about clarity. Ego wants noise, it wants drama. It wants to win arguments, to feel right, to prove a point. But karma doesn't argue, it doesn't even raise its voice. It just plants a seed. And then it lets silence do the rest. Because someone's ego has been inflated for too long, fed by attention, pride, or control. What truly shakes them is losing something real without fanfare, without explanation, just gone. And here's the part that most people miss on. Your silence becomes the loudest sound in their life. Not texting back, not defending yourself, not chasing them to make it right. Just living, just glowing, just continuing to grow in their absence. That's not cold. That's clarity. That's you choosing peace over chaos. It's you letting karma handle what your words never could. When someone knows you cared, really cared, and they feel that care go quiet, it leaves a mark. They won't admit it right away. They might even double down on pretending they're fine. But over time, it creeps in. Regret doesn't show up all at once. It leaks in through the cracks they tried to patch up with ego. It shows up when they realize no one else listens the way you did. No one laughs at their bad jokes the same. No one texts them just because. And when they go to reach for that feeling again, they realize they can't. Because it's not there anymore. They may try to find it in someone else. They may chase the old high. But karma reminds them, you don't get to mistreat something real and expect it to wait around. You don't get to neglect someone's heart and assume you'll get another shot. And you definitely don't get to keep someone in the background while you figure yourself out. So, while they're left sitting in the quiet, scrolling through memories and conversations they took for granted, you're moving forward. You're healing. You're becoming the version of yourself they'll one day wish they had appreciated. And karma is just there to make sure they feel every bit of that realization, softly, slowly, and unmistakably. The most unexpected twist in someone's story is watching the person they underestimated become everything they said they wanted. But without them, that's the sting. That's the quiet devastation karma delivers without ever having to say a word. When you grow, evolve, and become more grounded, confident, and self-loving, It shakes the very foundation of the ego that thought you'd stay small, stay hurt, stay available. The real plot twist is not that you left. It's that you became someone they no longer recognize, because you're no longer looking for their validation. In the beginning, they may have thought held the upper hand. Maybe they believed you needed them more than they needed you. Maybe they saw your heart, your effort, your availability, and mistook it for weakness. They didn't realize that love isn't desperation. It's courage. It's the courage to show up, to care, to be open. And when they didn't match that effort, when they mistook kindness for dependence, they assumed you'd be there no matter how many times they failed to meet you halfway. But you weren't waiting to be rescued. You were learning. You were absorbing the hard truths. You were watching how they responded when you needed them. You noticed how easily they took without giving back. And little by little, you stopped shrinking yourself to fit into the space they were willing to offer. That shift, though silent, is what set everything in motion. Because while they stayed comfortable in the idea that you'd never leave, you were slowly becoming someone who no longer begged for crumbs. That's when karma steps in. Not through revenge or confrontation, but through transformation. You didn't get bitter. You got better. You didn't try to break them down. You built yourself up. And one day, they'll look up and see a version of you they didn't believe you could become. A version that no longer looks back at them. They'll see your smile in someone else's arms. They'll hear your voice in places where they're no longer welcome. Your absence. They'll watch your light shine without needing their permission or approval. And the ego, that part of them that once thought it could come and go as it pleased, will take the hit, because regret doesn't hit hardest when you walk away angry. It hits hardest when you walk away glowing. People don't always regret losing you because they suddenly become different people overnight. They regret it because your growth becomes a mirror. They see all the things they failed to nurture, all the moments they chose silence over support, pride over vulnerability, games over honesty. They realize, often too late, that you weren't asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And maybe at first, they convince themselves they're fine. They distract, they date, they deflect. But real growth can't be unseen. And when they see you evolve into everything you were always capable of becoming, without their help, without their attention, it's a quiet reckoning. That's the plot twist. The one where you were never the one who needed fixing. You were just waiting to be seen fully. And when you weren't, you decided to see yourself. They'll feel it. Not in some dramatic movie scene, but in the little moments. In the late night scrolls, in mutual friends' stories, in a song that brings you to mind. Karma doesn't need to shout that you're gone. It just lets them sit with the version of you they were never ready for. The one who stopped asking for love and became it instead. There's a moment that hits much harder than any breakup speech, any emotional outburst, or any final argument. It's not the loud moments people remember. It's the silence that follows. The absence. The stillness. That's when it really sinks in. Because when someone loses you, truly loses you, not just temporarily, not just in a dramatic fight, but in that quiet, calm, nothing left to say way, your absence speaks louder than anything you could have screamed. That silence, it stays with them. At first, they might not notice it. They think it's just space. Maybe they assume you're cooling off, maybe even trying to make a point. But then the hours stretch into days, the days into weeks, and you don't come chasing. You don't check in, you don't argue, ask questions, or try to fix things. And that's when they start to feel it. Not the punishment of losing your words, but the weight of your withdrawal. They were used to your effort, your check-ins, your presence. You were the consistent one. And now that energy, that warmth, that constant heartbeat in the background of their life is gone. That's what hits the ego. The part of them that thought you'd never leave. The part that counted on you being the one who always reached back out. When you stop trying, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, it forces them to face what they never thought they'd have. Tog, the reality that you're not available anymore. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Not even energetically. You've closed the door quietly, without slamming it, and that makes it feel even more final. It's in that space that karma starts to whisper. Not loudly, not with drama, but with the kind of clarity that only comes when everything else goes still. That moment they go to send you a message and stop themselves. Not because they don't want to, but because they're not sure you'd even care anymore. That moment they hear something funny and instinctively think of you, only to realize they don't get to share it with you. That's the kind of regret that creeps in slowly and settles deeply. You didn't need to yell to make your point. You didn't need to explode, because your silence says, I've seen enough, I've felt enough, and I'm done asking for what should be given freely. That message is more powerful than anything words could deliver. It doesn't argue, it doesn't negotiate, it just is. And that unspoken truth hits differently. It lingers. It repeats itself in their mind every time they realize they were the one who pushed you to this point. When someone truly cared for you and you walked away, they may try to convince themselves you were overreacting, that you were too sensitive, that you'll come back when you calm down. But when you don't, when you choose silence over drama, peace over chaos, they're left to sit with the reality that they misread you entirely, that you weren't being dramatic. You were being done. They don't feel the loss when you walk away with noise. They feel it when they look around one day and you're no longer part of their world. No goodbye post, no final text, just absence. That's when it really hits. Because now they have to live with the version of the story where you're not coming back. And that quiet, it's deafening. Not because you made it that way, but because they did. And they only realize it once you stop explaining yourself. And that's the thing about karma. It doesn't have to raise its voice. It just lets them sit in the silence they created and feel every single second of what it's like to lose someone who once would have done anything to stay. There's something deeply unsettling about being alone with your own thoughts, especially when those thoughts are laced with regret. That's where karma does its finest work. Not out in the open, not in front of an audience, but in those quiet moments when there's nowhere left to run, no distractions to drown out the truth, and no one there to blame. Karma doesn't chase public revenge. It prefers privacy. It waits until the world goes still and the weight of your own decisions becomes too loud to ignore. When someone treats you like you're disposable or plays games with your heart, they may seem unaffected at first. They carry on with their life, unbothered, maybe even smug. They might post smiling pictures, tell mutual friends they're doing just fine, or act like losing you was no big deal. But deep down, they know what they lost. And that knowledge doesn't come crashing in all at once. It sneaks up, slowly, through familiar songs, old photos, or random triggers they didn't expect. They'll hear your name in passing, or catch a glimpse of something that reminds them of you. And suddenly, they're not as okay as they pretend to be. That's the genius of karma. It doesn't show up when they're surrounded by noise. It waits until they're sitting in a moment of stillness. When the party ends, the messages slow down and their ego starts to deflate. That's when it strikes, not with fury, but with memory. Karma turns everyday life into a series of flashbacks, and they don't even have to be big moments. Sometimes it's the way you used to say their name, or how you always remembered the little things no one else noticed. Those moments play on a loop, not because they want them to, but because their subconscious won't let them go. You're not there to tell them what they lost. You don't have to remind them. Karma already has. In fact, it does a better job than you ever could, because there's something far more powerful about letting someone feel the void than trying to fill it with explanations. You're not giving speeches. You're not writing long texts, and you're not trying to make them see what they should have seen the first time around. You've gone quiet. You've chosen your peace. And now they're stuck with the version of the story where they're the one who let go of something real, and no one is clapping for that. In public, they might still pretend. They'll scroll past your posts, resist the urge to message you, and keep up the image that they've moved on. But behind closed doors, that's when they're watching. That's when they were reading old conversations, maybe even typing messages they'll never send. Because what really hits isn't losing you in front of the world. It's losing you in their own private reality. That's what karma does. It doesn't create a scene. It creates a mirror. And the more they look into it, the more they realize they were the one who caused the distance, the silence, the ending. You didn't have to tear them down. You didn't need to orchestrate some grand exit. You just stepped back. And in doing so, you gave karma the space to move in, not with fury, but with facts, with memories, with quiet reminders of everything they mishandled. They'll try to rewrite the story, but their conscience won't let them. Because the truth always finds a way back, and when it does, it doesn't need to shout. It just sits there, in the silence, asking the question they can't answer. Why did you let them go? There's this common misconception that walking away means giving up. That, if you truly cared, you'd fight harder, try longer, stay just a little more. But there comes a point where staying isn't a sign of strength anymore. It's a slow surrender of your self-worth. And the most powerful moment in any relationship, especially one that's been full of imbalance or emotional push and pull, is when you choose to let go. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself more. Letting go isn't weakness. It's not a collapse or a breakdown. It's clarity. It's the realization that love, as beautiful as it can be, is not supposed to cost your peace, your dignity, or your identity. You're not supposed to have to convince someone to treat you right. You're not meant to chase their attention or beg for basic respect. And when you stop trying to earn what should be given freely, it's not a loss. It's a power move. They might not see it that way at first. From the outside, it might look like you gave up. You stopped reaching out. You stopped trying to explain yourself. You no longer reacted the way you used to when they pushed your buttons. To them, that may look like indifference, but it's not. It's strength. It's growth. It's you taking your energy back from a place that only drained it. And while they may think you'll circle back like before, they don't realize that this time something changed. This time, the silence isn't a pause. It's the end of the conversation. The ego doesn't know what to do with someone who no longer plays the game. When you stop showing up for the same patterns, it shakes them. They thought they knew how you'd react. They thought they could get the same version of you on demand. But you're not that version anymore. You've evolved. And nothing makes a person question their choices more than realizing that the person they once took for granted is no longer available. Not emotionally, not mentally, not at all. That's when the regret starts to surface, not right away. It usually creeps in slowly. When they see you smiling in a photo they're not part of. When someone else starts to notice the very things they overlooked. When they realize you no longer need their approval to feel whole. That's when it hits. Not only did they lose you, but they also lost access to the person who would have done anything for them. They might still try to act unaffected. Maybe they double down on their pride, tell themselves they're better off. But there will come a moment, maybe months from now, when they'll feel it. In the quiet, in the absence, in the space where your energy used to be. They'll realize that you didn't leave because you were weak. You left because you finally realized your value, and you stopped offering yourself to someone who couldn't recognize it. Letting go was never the easy choice. It required more courage than staying ever did. Because staying meant familiarity, even if it was painful. Letting go meant walking into the unknown, choosing healing over history, self-worth over attachment. That's what makes it a power move. Not a declaration of war, not an act of revenge. Just a quiet revolution within yourself that says, I deserve more than this. And the most beautiful part, you didn't need to shout about it. You didn't need to slam the door or burn the bridge. You just walked away with your peace intact and your head held high. And that's something their ego will feel long after your footsteps have faded. There's a moment, often delayed but deeply piercing, when someone realizes the person they let go of wasn't just another name in their past, but the very person who came into their life to teach them how to love better, how to show up more fully, how to be the version of themselves they always claimed they wanted to become. That realization doesn't come through external judgment or someone telling them they messed up. It comes from within, from the slow unfolding truth that you weren't their mistake. You were their lesson. At first, they may frame it differently. It's easier to say you were too emotional, too demanding, or that the timing was off. The ego loves those kinds of excuses because they shift responsibility. They allow someone to walk away from something meaningful without confronting the hard truth that they simply weren't ready to receive the love you offered. But time has a way of stripping away those illusions. Eventually, it becomes harder to pretend you were just a detour when everything about you starts to feel like the destination they never appreciated. This is what karma reveals, not in loud, obvious ways, but in how your absence forces them to finally confront who they were when they had you. Not just who you were, but what they did with the opportunity to be loved by someone genuine. It's one thing to lose someone who never truly connected with you, but it's something else entirely to lose someone who saw you, cared deeply, and still chose to walk away because you couldn't meet them at that same emotional depth. You weren't asking for perfection. You were asking for presence, honesty, growth. You weren't demanding more than you gave. You were simply asking not to be made small for loving loudly. And when that wasn't met, you walked. Not because you didn't care, but because you did. About yourself. You reached a place where you refused to shrink to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. And maybe they didn't realize what that meant at the time. But one day, they will. One day it'll hit them that they were loved by someone who didn't just want attention. They wanted connection. Someone who didn't just want a relationship. They wanted partnership. That's when the regret turns inward. That's when it becomes less about missing you as a person and more about realizing they missed the entire point of what you brought into their life. You didn't come to be temporary. You weren't a placeholder. You were a mirror, showing them what they could have had if they'd been brave enough to meet you there. But they weren't, and karma doesn't punish them for that. It just lets them live with the truth of it. And the truth is, you were the lesson, the person who showed them what love could be before they were ready to hold it. The person who left not because you stopped loving them, but because you started loving yourself more. The one they'll think about when they're with someone new, wondering why it doesn't feel the same. The one who'll come to mind when they hear a song that brings back a specific moment, a laugh, a look, something they thought they'd forget, but never quite can. They'll replay it not because you're unforgettable in the way ego chases, but because you're unforgettable in the way the soul remembers. Because you didn't just pass through their life, you marked it. And eventually, karma brings them to that understanding, not with chaos, not with public consequences, but with quiet, unshakable clarity. You were never the mistake. You were the moment they were supposed to grow. And they'll carry that truth long after you've let it go. So if you've ever wondered whether karma will catch up, if they'll ever realize what they lost, stop waiting for the fireworks. Karma doesn't announce itself. It doesn't post receipts or chase closure. It simply lets people sit with the truth they tried to avoid. And trust me, nothing humbles the ego more than watching someone they once took for granted become untouchable through quiet growth. You don't have to yell. You don't have to prove anything. The most powerful thing you can do is move on without bitterness. Love yourself without apology, and live a life so full that it becomes a mirror they can't escape. Because in the end, karma's not about revenge, it's about reflection. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, they'll look back and realize you weren't the one who lost. They were.